this week's Torah portion is, anybody? You're like, I don't even know where you are in the Torah portions because you're totally off the schedule. Okay, we're doing Naso this time. And some people will write it as SSO, Naso, and it has a couple different meanings on it, but can someone give me an idea of what it means? How about elevate? It means elevate, and it can also mean lift up, take, like as in take a census. So those are some ideas. It comes from Leviticus chapter, where are we at? Chapter 4, right in the middle of the chapter, through 789. 789, correct? Yeah. Yeah, chapter 7 is a very, very long chapter. So there we go.
You said Leviticus.
Did I say Leviticus? I'm sorry. I mean Numbers. Oh, my goodness.
I didn't catch that.
Didn't catch that.
I was like, we passed Leviticus. I don't know where you're going.
Oh, I got the wind blowing hair look today.
Nobody's looking at your
Nobody's
hair.
that's good. You're looking at my big part. That's probably what you're looking at. No. Yeah, because what happens is I get out of the shower and I get in the car, and because I've got to replace the AC compressor, I'm opening all the windows and also the top. Yeah, so I'm like getting wind everywhere. You should see me when I get here. I look like Bozo. Bozo had a big part, didn't he? He had a very big part. And a red nose. Okay, enough of that. Does anybody remember Bozo the Clown?
We all
do.
did.
You do? Okay.
But let's not chase that
I just want to say that was because then came the age of everybody's afraid of clowns, and Bozo was great.
Your son is one of them.
No clowns.
No clowns.
I don't like clowns.
See, it's a generational thing. We love clowns. We went to
Yeah.
the circus and all that.
I used
What
to
do
love
kids
clowns.
think when they go to the circus and see all these clowns out there?
Well, I liked it, and I decorated Jonathan's room at circus when he was a baby, so guess what?
No.
And Jonathan doesn't like clowns.
Oh,
I never watched those. And, they came out with all that clown stuff, the scary clown stuff.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah,
sad.
like
They
the
corrupted
Mine had nothing to
innocence.
do. I was already afraid of clowns.
Were
Like
you?
that, I haven't even seen any of that.
Oh,
stuff.
okay. Well, that's good to
Nor did
know.
we ever want to see
No.
it.
No,
But
no, seriously.
Yeah, I was still always afraid of clowns.
Well, as a kid, if you're not used to clowns and you've got this big, goofy person coming at you, it's going to terrify you and it's going to trigger that
Well,
trauma.
the first clown that I had come at me was my sister, and I didn't recognize her, and she scared the daylights out of me.
Well, I traumatized my own kids, so enough of that.
Well, so what does that have to do with Naso?
Nothing.
Actually, nothing. There's just no connection, but it's very interesting. So anyway, Linda said, I grew up watching Bozo. I don't like clowns anymore, though. All right. Clowns. Story of our lives. Okay, so Naso. And let's begin reading, and let's see if we can start breaking it down a little bit and see what the Father would show us. But before we do that, let's pray. And Sandi, would you open us in prayer?
Father, we come before you right now in the name of Yeshua, and we give you praise and thanks and honor and glory for all that you're doing for us. Thank you for this beautiful, wonderful day, and for the rain that you've given us, and for the family that you've brought forth, and for all those that are with us here presently in this building, those who are missing, and those who are all over the world listening who are our family. We thank you and we praise you for each and every one of them, for they are such a blessing to us. Thank you that we get to open your word and share it, just like there's no distance. There's no distance in prayer, and there's no distance when we come together, and we want to glorify your name. Open our eyes to see and our ears to hear all that you would want us to learn and that you want to reveal to us today, because we are ready. We want to know what you have to say. We want to know what you are doing in us and amongst us. Continue to lead us and guide us, for we dedicate this day this day for you, for where two or more are gathered. And Father, you are enveloped, you are enthroned in our praise. And we give you praise right now. We give you honor. Father, thank you. Bring your revelation, bring your truth. And Father, let us iron sharpen iron as we are here together. We thank you and praise you in Yeshua's name.
Amen.
Amen.
And so this Torah portion, hey, William, it's so good to see you. It really is. So this Torah portion has to do with a lot of different things. It goes over the duties of the Gershonites, the duties of the Marorites. It goes and talks about issues of defilement. There's the adultery test, and there's the law of the Nazarites, and then it goes through, and in chapter 7, where all of the leaders of Israel, the elders of Israel, bring offerings. So isn't it interesting that Numbers, Bamidbar, in the wilderness, is really just, we had that small little interlude of Vayikra, of Leviticus, and now we're just continuing a little bit of that. We're kind of walking around this whole idea of the organization of the camp of Israel, and the very thought that Israel, and we've mentioned this before, is that they built the tabernacle. I'm going to go ahead and, everybody knows, right? We're already good with what Naso means
Yes,
and
we
where
have
it's
that.
located and all that. I don't need to keep it on the board the whole time. But in the middle of the camp was the tabernacle, right? It has the tabernacle, and then it had the altar, and it had a fence around it. And then around that was where everybody set up the camp. And I know we've talked about this, but so many different times. However, how many times have we seen, and just to bring out this picture, how many times have we seen that the setting up of the camp kind of looked like this huge block, right? And
I
you said,
thought that it doesn't look like that.
I know you have, and so we had,
Actually, the ones I've seen the most common were they were set up in the form of a cross.
They're set up in a circle, just as the heavens.
yeah, and so you can, they would do it like, this block. It's almost like you get this idea how they've done it before. This marker is going out on me. I'm gonna need.
Well, I got you a whole new package, why didn't you leave
There's-
it back here?
There's new ones up front. So, kind of like a military array, kind of like Roman legions. Romans, it's like, well, they're definitely not Romans. Where, like Tammy said, kind of set up in the area of a cross, kind of looking like almost maybe a big square, but it really wasn't set up that way. Why? Well, let's look at something that we've seen more so in modern history. What would happen when the settlers, as they went west, they left the
They circled the wagons.
yeah, right. I was thinking about the Santa Fe Trail that runs from, what is that? It's around Olathe, Kansas City area, right there. And they would go out in the big wagon trails, wagon caravans of stuff. And what would they always do? When it came to setting up camp for the night, after a long day of traveling about 6 miles, I mean, that's about all they could travel with a ox or a horse they would circle up the wagons, right? And why would they circle up the wagons?
It was easier to
Protection.
Mhm.
Okay, these are my wagons, they're not like exact rectangles, but yeah, in the middle they set up fires, or kind of around the encampment and stuff. But yeah, it's a wall. It's a wall, it's a barrier, it's protection. And, well, guess what? If you really think about it, isn't that what Israel did?
Mhm.
Why? Because they would set up in a wall of encampments where all the tents would be setting up walls, and within walls, all the way to the tabernacle, which had its walls, because a wall is around its tent. So we have multiple tents with setting up walls around it, and a tent in the middle that had its own individual walls. And I think it really kind of lends this big picture of type of thing of what what is it that's really being protected? What is so significant that's in the middle of the camp? Because even within the tabernacle itself, you also have another division of the Holy of Holies. And it really, if one were to step back or get up on top of Mount Sinai or something and look down and look at the encampment, you'd really be looking at, wow, there must be something really special in the middle of that camp. For here, they'd circle up the wagons, but in here was all the place where the people could gather after a long day's trip. They would break out their meals, they eat their beans and rice or whatever they might be eating, and the family, the kids would be playing, and it's a safe place. It's a sacred place, and so you kind of get that idea of how they're setting up the camp, this organization of the camp. And
Central fire pit, basically, too, for everybody to do their cooking.
the central fire pit. You know what's very interesting? Because wasn't there a central fire pit here, which would be called the altar?
Yeah.
It's not that everybody was being able to use it, but in that instant.
But the sacrifices and the offerings were there.
Yeah,
So,
which is, in essence is, I won't say like feeding Yahweh, but in essence, it is this beautiful
Holy
aroma of this incense that's and fragrance of the burnt offerings and stuff, and the not only just the burnt offerings, but all of the different offerings is a fragrant aroma before the Father. It's just coming out from the central part. Now, what about if you really look at all of this? Have you ever thought about the human body being the same way? That we have all of these different layers. I mean, think about this. Our arms and our legs, I mean, they're kind of like an outer part, but we've got the skin, we got the muscles, we got the bones, we got all the sinews, we got all the blood vessels, we have the organs and stuff. But at the center of all that, behind the rib cage is what? Is our heart. The very thing that has to be protected, because it is the heart that is most easily corrupted. And so we have to really look at it. This is the heart of Yah. And this out here is his body. So it really takes us over to 1 Corinthians, if you want to go there with me. Look at that. Somebody must have been eating popcorn when they were reading their Bible. I found some caramel popcorn. Save for a later time. Okay, let's go to 1 Corinthians. Let's go to let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Let's start with verse 12. I think this is probably a good connection. It says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be mastered by anything. Food is for the stomach, and the stomach is for food, but Yah will do away with both of them, yet the body is not for immorality, but for Yahweh, and Yahweh is for the body. Now, Yah has not only raised the Lord, but will raise us up. So he's talking about Yeshua. He's not only raised him up, but will raise us up through his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Messiah? Shall I then take away the members of Messiah and make them members of a harlot? May it never be. Or do you not know that the one who joins himself to a harlot is one body with her? For he says the two will become one flesh, but the one who joins himself to Yahweh is one spirit with him. So let's read the next verse. Flee immorality. Every sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. Now let's take that right there, because we're going to go a little bit further in there, so keep your fingers there. So think about this. what happened, fast forwarding, because we're going to get there later on here in Bamidbar, in Numbers, where Balaam told the Midianites how to attack Israel. How would they do that? They would send the Midianite women into the camp. So here we have this camp, and it's a fortress. And at the very heart of the fortress is what? The tabernacle. And the very heart of the tabernacle is the Holy of Holies. And the very fact that the Midianites would be up here somewhere, wherever it might be, whatever angle, let's say it's over here. Or you could say it's over here. I don't know. Yeah, let's say it's over here. Let's say they're up here on the mountains, and they're looking down at this camp. I mean, this is what Balaam's doing. It's like, well, check this out. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, I can't curse them, but I have an idea. You can go after them. And because you cannot send a force against them, but you can send harlotry to them. And that will be the way that you can penetrate through the camp to get to the heart of the camp. Well, what was it said that took place? Because let's see, Zimri and I don't remember the names right off the top of my head. But anyway, they went in to commit harlotry, which was also a form of worship of a different god. So to get there, they came into the camp. It's just a bunch of women. Hey, no big deal. Let's bring them in. Let's party. Let's have a good time. Hey, these are the natives of the land. Let's be friendly with them. A little too friendly. But it's been said that when Phineas went in and killed the two. Can someone look up their names? Because it's really bothering me.
I'm in the process of looking it up. I don't have my,
And I would have to say, in his zeal,
It's Zimri and Cosby.
Zimri and Cosby. Yeah, and he drove the spear through them.
both of them in the end.
Because the fact is that it may have been, there's some, we don't know all the facts about it because the scripture is silent about it. So the traditions say that they had actually gone into the very tabernacle, because that was what the traditions was. They went into the tabernacle. Phineas said, no way, this is horrible, and takes the spear and drives it through. And it says that he would be remembered through all generations, by which we get the house of Zadok later on. So what is Paul really talking about here in 1 Corinthians chapter 12? Why is it that he's saying there's this thing called immorality, and I don't want you to be involved in it? It says, or do you not know, chapter 6, verse 16 of 1 Corinthians, do you not know that one who joins himself to a harlot is one body with her? For he says, the two will become one flesh. But the one who joins himself to Yahweh is one spirit with him. Flee immorality. Every other sin that a man commits outside the body is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. The very fact that how can we take that which represents Yeshua and start bringing in the mixture of the very thing? I almost think that Paul is almost giving us a midrash on the whole Pincus situation. How can you take this body and then bring in these others and then destroy the sanctity?
It's adultery.
Yeah. And so a lot of times, yes, is it true adultery and all that sort of stuff should not be done? We know that. That's the surface thing.
It's like adultery of the Lord's.
Yeah.
For being the bride, you don't go mess around with other things.
Because this whole idea of adultery is that it goes all the way to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about this many times here at Life of Worship over the years, but talking about soul ties.
Mm-hmm.
The very fact that when one joins themselves intimately with another person creates a soul tie, a connection. Well, what is a soul tie? Is that kind of new agey or whatever?
No.
There is a spiritual link
Come on.
that connects one to that person. And outside of marriage, it is a harmful link. And especially if both people have been involved in multiple different relationships, then there's multiple, so it's been said that if one is intimate with somebody else that's had 10 other partners, then now there's soul ties to 10 other partners. If you wonder why people can be so messed up, it's because of this warning here. And in this whole picture of the way they set up the camp is to protect the very hard issues. And so the soul ties would have, the Father says, I don't want anything outside of my relationship with you to be anything but pure. And so in our relationships with one another, we don't want to have anything in our relationships that will bring in those other ties into our own marriage relationship.
Those spirits, you're bringing in other spirits. You're bringing in the spirits that they've got in them.
Think about it as like a web. And every one of these webs have, it's like a communication transportation system. Now there's an open corridor, open door here, open door here, open door there. And you think about, I had a picture in my mind of the ladder, Jacob's ladder. Like this up and down, the angels are going up and down this ladder, this staircase, or whatever, however you want to describe it, up into heaven. But think about that as these expressways or these fiber optic connections between, which is light speed, and you're connected to this other person. You wonder, why do I keep having these strange feelings? Or I never had those feelings before. Since this happened, it was just a light, innocent affair or whatever, and it starts to complicate and create all of this inner turmoil. And so let's go on a little bit more here. So why, besides keeping the sanctity of the tabernacle,
Your vessel.
think about all of those fiber optic communication systems with the fallen ones, which many would call idols, other gods, false gods, however you want to look at it. I'm going to tell you this, out of the things that we've been studying and what even the House of Zadok would talk about in the Qumran writings, is that these are entities that are real, that were worshipped, that actually had supernatural influence on people. They believed that, they saw it, and they recognized that there was a big difference between them and the rest of the world. They say that's why they call themselves the sons of light, and those are the sons of darkness. You can generalize it and say it, specify it, and say those that were in Jerusalem, with the control of the second, this is the second temple period, they usurped the power. This would be called the sons of darkness, because like a cult, they set up their own religious system with similarities or things that resembled the truth, but actually it was a cult. So the sons of Zadok are saying that's just darkness. But you can extend it that the sons of darkness would also be anybody else, the Canaanites, the Midianites, the Babylonians, the Egyptians. You put a name on it, they're all out there, and they're trying to communicate. They're trying to connect with the Most High. One of the things that's very interesting, I want to bring this out. We've been reviewing this over in the book of Enoch, in these communication systems, and the corruptions.
The heavenlies haven't changed, and neither of the universe that he built.
No, they haven't changed.
So it still applies.
And the thing that I'm learning more and more is that how many times we think about, there's all this new revelation. Do you realize it's not new revelation?
Not new.
It's just stuff that's been buried. Right? And it's for us to go dig up those treasures. In other words, sometimes those treasures were never buried. It's just the sands of time covered them up, you know, through false doctrines and the what was it, the leaven of the Pharisees, so to speak, things that got covered up over time. And okay, so where is the thing about the secrets? The secrets. I'm going to find it. So it's around chapter 14 of Enoch. Maybe it's chapter 15. So, there it is, chapter 16. So here's what chapter 16 says. It's very short. I'm going to read it to you. Chapter 16, verse 1 of Enoch. And as to the death of the giants, wheresoever their ruachot, their spirits, depart from their bodies, let their flesh, that which is perishable, be destroyed before the judgment. Thus shall they perish until the day of the great consummation of the great world. A destruction shall take place of the watchers and the impious. And now the watchers who have sent you to pray for them, who in the beginning were in heaven, say, in heaven have you been. Secret things, however, have not been manifested to you, yet have you known a reprobated mystery. And this you have related to women in the hardness of your heart, and by that mystery have women and mankind multiplied evils upon the earth. Say to them, never, therefore, shall you obtain peace. So, what worship systems were set up because of the influence of the watchers. And these watchers, where were they? They were heavenly beings. They were eternal ones. They were not to be connected to anything on earth. They are eternal beings. But what do? As we were studying out Enoch this last week, it says that that they looked upon mankind and they liked what they saw. They saw how men and women had relationships and all that sort of thing in their role. Their role was to watch over and to help mankind, and they failed to do that.
They rebelled.
And but it says it talks about they manifested themselves to people, and the women enticed them. Actually, that's what Enoch said. But they willingly connected themselves to the women, and they produced the offspring, which came to be the giants. Their place in heaven, they got to see different mysteries of heaven. I mean, think about all of the supernatural things of heaven. They weren't given the secrets of heaven, but they were very smart. They could connect the dots, but they only had little bits of those images. And in those images, it says, according to Enoch, it says reprobated mysteries. Reprobated mysteries. So, in other words, they took what they saw and then they tried to develop it for more purposes and teach those things to mankind. It all came through this process of the angels uniting themselves with women. They had offsprings, but it creates a harlotry between heaven and earth. So why else do you think we would have this whole part of the sanctuary would need to be protected? Because it only says 200 of the watchers were actually imprisoned until the time of judgment. There were more that were not imprisoned. These were just the leaders. Because doesn't it say even in the book of Noah, it says that the Nephilim were before and after the flood? Well, where did they come from? Where did they come from? Because there was more of the angels still producing offspring. I mean, how did Goliath come about? That was a long time after Noah. So they're still producing offspring. You know,
Well, the giants filled the land, Remember, when they went to conquer, the giants were still all over the land.
They were all over the land.
They
yeah.
may not have been the 430-foot tall giants, but they were still giants.
Yeah, yeah. So, what is it that Balaam was actually given? I know we're jumping ahead to a future Torah portion, but what was he trying to do? They said, you know what, I can't curse them, but I am going to provide a fiber optic light speed connection, because through the women, we're going to infiltrate all the way into the tabernacle. We're going to get through these outer layers of protection. And that mixture is going to be bringing these other mysteries. How did Balaam get the information that he needed? Why is it that he would have this connection with and not be able to even curse? He would only speak the blessings of Yah. How would he be considered a prophet, even though he was so corrupt?
You can still be spoken to if you're corrupt.
So through these sorceries, they would be able to connect. And they would still be able to get these mysteries, maybe get on the same sound wave, communication systems, and catch glimpses. And still, you say, well, they're not saved. Well, how in the world do we still have, even today, you've got the black arts, you've got witchcraft, you have sorceries, you have all of these new age ideas that people bypass the kingdom and to have a direct access into the realm of the spiritual in order to have supernatural knowledge, supernatural abilities, supernatural influence. And it's because of this. Well, let's go back over here to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Flee immorality. Every other sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. So what did Zimri and Cosby do? Of course, Cosby was just, an influencer. Zimri says, let's go into this place. And he's committing a sin against his own body. What's his own body? It's the entire encampment of Israel. He is sinning against the entire encampment. There was no other choice for Pinchas to do other than to pick up the spear and to thrust it through them. He had to stop that fiber. I mean, think of it like this, like these. I think of it like AI technology, artificial intelligence, that continues, that has the ability. Just think, the fingers of AI have the ability to get into every computer system and influence every computer system in the entire world and infect it. Why does Hollywood jump on the case and say, oh, there'll be a time when artificial intelligence becomes
One with human.
self-aware, and then recognizes the evilness of humans, so therefore it must get rid of humans for the sake of its own survival. I mean, how many Hollywood movies have we seen?
just come
Something
out
like
all in
that.
the series.
That thread that just goes out into everything, and then you can't cut it off unless you go, you've pulled the plug somewhere. How do you do that? Well, I think this is what it's talking about. This thing is so subtle. It is so subtle, and that's what it was wanting to do, is go out and protect. Yahweh is saying, protect this at all cost. And we're not just putting bodies, because who protects the tabernacle?
We do the thing.
The Levites,
Yes.
right? Here in the wilderness.
The Hebrews.
So the Levites protected. There was their own Praetorian guard. They were the guard of the tabernacle. They were to make sure there was no ungodly influence, no attacks, whatever. They were supposed to protect the tabernacle. But outside here, we just read last week in Numbers what it says to count the men age 20 to 60. Count the men. Why? Because this was the next line of defense. And we're talking about it in terms of a military way, but what about in a non-military way? What about in a spiritual way? How important are they recognizing that their physical presence is more than just a physical defense? So that the role of everybody from that's camped closest all the way to the outer edges is more than just a physical thing, but it's a spiritual thing. It is a spiritual defense. If they would recognize the spiritual attack of the Midian women coming into the camp, they would never let them cross that boundary. And there would have been resistance in the spiritual and a resistance in the physical. So I think what Paul is talking about here, flee immorality, every sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. So what did Zimri do? He sinned against the entire body. Anybody letting them in also sinning against the body. And verse 19, or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from Yah, and that you are not your own? For you have been bought with a price, therefore glorify Yah in your body. Was not Israel bought with a price, redeemed from Egypt, brought out from slavery?
See, and here's about worship right here. Mine says, so use your bodies to glorify God. Well, how would you do that? Well, it's in your actions, but it's also in your worship.
Yeah, that's true too. So,
And you have to have a relationship. That relationship is you working with the Holy Spirit to do what you need to do. And you can't just go one day and then don't come and see him for a week. It doesn't work that way.
that's very truthful there. Exactly. So, this array of the encampment is huge. And I think, in bottom line, it's really reflecting on this relationship that we have with Messiah. And isn't it interesting? You know, so is Paul. I think Paul was talking about human relationships. But I think he was also doing a midrash on this whole idea of this tabernacle in the wilderness. Now, what do you think about this? They're set up as kind of discussing their roles, how they're set up, the camp, the numbering of the people, the roles of the Kohathites, that was last week, and then duties of the Gershonites, and then of the Merarites. Okay.
Ice.
Yeah, those guys. And the sons of Merari. And yet, in this Torah portion, what's the next thing it does after talking about their duties and responsibilities? It goes in with a discussion regarding defilement. So let's look at this. Can I get someone to read chapter 5, Numbers 5, 1 through 10? And I may interrupt you, but we'll keep reading as we hit some points on this. So if someone would do that. Numbers, Bamidbar, chapter 5, begin with verse 1.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, command the children of Israel to send out of the camp every leper and everyone who has a discharge and everyone who becomes defiled for a being. Send out both male and female. Send them outside the camp so that they do not defile their camps in the midst of which I dwell. And the children of Israel did so, to send them outside the camp as Yahweh had spoken to Moshe, so that the children of Israel did. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, when a man or a woman commits any sin that men commit and trespass against Yahweh, and that being is guilty, then they shall confess their sin which they have done, and he shall restore his guilt in its principal, plus 1/5 of it, and give it to whom he has been guilty. But if the man has no relative to restore the guilt to, the guilt which is restored goes to Yahweh. For the priest, in addition to the ram of the atonement with which atonement is made for him. And every contribution of all the set-apart gifts of the children of Israel which they bring to the priest becomes his. And every man's set-apart gifts becomes his. Whatever any man gives the priest becomes his.
Okay, so now we're expanding a little bit more in regards to defilement. What are some areas of defilement there to talk about? That these people that have these issues going on are defiled. So who are the defiled?
Those out of the,
Did
that
you
not,
grab
are
it?
not really in the camp.
I gave it to you already.
Did I grab it already?
Yeah,
Okay.
in your hand.
Okay, so which one specifically is it listing? Verse 2, we have a leper, a person with a discharge. What else do we have? Unclean because of
Defiled for the
touching the dead,
dead.
right? And so those are okay, those three right there. The leper, the discharge, and touching the dead. Kind of an interesting thing. Now, again, what is it that we're looking at that y'all said cannot be in this camp? Now, is it a sin that one is dealing, that has leprosy? In other words, he's got a skin condition. Is that a sin?
Not directly.
Not directly, right? Yet we've,
It's unclean, so it's disease.
it's some type, disease. And we know from the picture of Miriam, and that she got the leprosy when she spoke evil, the Lashon Hara, when she spoke evil of Moses. And so we have that. So there, it may be tied to a sin, right? So we have a physical manifestation of something, of an inner issue that's taking
But
place.
uncleanness in itself is not a sin condition.
But uncleanness in and of itself, you're right, is not a,
I mean, there can be
Sin.
other
Yeah, but that's-
conditions why you've got it,
right? So,
not just sin.
discharge, I mean, what's the issue about a discharge? It can't be in the camp. You gotta go outside the camp.
One of it is illness, but two, depending upon where that discharge is, it is a sign of sexual immorality, because if you stop and think about your sexually transmitted diseases,
Okay,
a lot of those produce a discharge.
okay. Now, that's a good point. And then that ties us back to what we were talking about before, this type of defilement. Do we need that optic connection, that fiber optic connection in the camp? Because will it spread? I mean, in terms of a discharge disease type of contagious thing, well, we want to make sure that that's not being done physically within the camp, because we want to maintain the health of the camp.
Yeah.
But it's a spiritual condition. So because I think we could say, based on what we know about Miriam, leprosy is a physical manifestation of a spiritual condition. A discharge, physical manifestation of a spiritual condition? Maybe so. If it has to do specifically with some type of immorality that's going on, then,
But then again, you have other diseases as well, so it depends on where that discharge is.
Yes, I mean, your
which way
hormones
it
can make
leans.
you have skin irritations.
right? I mean, you can cut yourself and have a discharge. You can have
Yes.
a pus type of infection going on, right? You have to be, and so what about the condition of the dead? I
We
mean,
don't know why they died.
don't know,
We don't know why they died. I mean, they could die from disease, or could be carrying something, or they could start to necrotize and spread disease that way.
right? So that just upon death, the body is already decomposing, full of bacteria, and it can spread. And so going outside the camp, going through the process of the cleansing, purification process allows all of that dead bacteria, whatever the case may be, to die off
Well, and
before bringing it
Miriam
back into
was-
the camp.
Miriam was slandering somebody's reputation too, when she came against Moses' wife. She was slandering her. She was saying, her attitude was like, okay, what are you doing with her,
Well, they both were.
She's not good enough.
So that would, that's
But
again,
there's times that you have to set yourself apart from people, but she was just being disobedient, bless you.
Excuse me.
and it's interesting. I don't think she knowingly knew she was being disobedient.
Probably not.
And, I mean, I know we've talked about that before. I think that it's also, she was trying to be helpful. And how many times do we step in trying to be helpful when in reality, our motivations, what's the true condition of the heart is actually what is evil.
Are you trying to set yourself up as God? Because that's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
You have to let God handle that. Do you go in your prayer closet? Yes. You may need to pray for him, but you let him handle it.
And that's where it was Yah who was able to discern exactly what was going on with Miriam. The issue was, it's been said, the rumor was, it was been said that she was concerned about Moses' relationship with his wife. And whether that's true or not, we don't know. That's just kind of been some of
Could be
the
gossip.
traditions of the thoughts about that.
Mhm.
But that wasn't for her to be talking about, right?
Now.
But that would be, but again,
You do go to your leaders
the
sometimes.
very fact is that sometimes people do. We've experienced that here at Life of Worship. In the idea of, oh, we need to help out Pastor John and Sandy at Life of Worship. We're going to gather all these people against them and tell them they need to take a break and we'll just take over.
Mhm.
That's happened. That happened here.
No.
And is that y'all's plan? Is that for Life of Worship? Or were they fulfilling the purposes of Life of Worship? Or were they actually
Fulfilling the purposes of the enemy. as
fulfilling
tools.
the purposes of the enemy? Yeah. So, this strict maintenance of the purity of the camp is really significant. Let me look at this. So we've already been talking about this. So the contagion. What is this contagion, physically and spiritually?
Pollution.
And putting themselves into personal danger should they come near to the holiness of the Almighty. Just think about that. Is that not an act of mercy of y'all to say, hey, there's something going on here. They get too close, they're dead. So
Just like the guys with the ark.
So think about in terms of in the heavenly realm. One of the things that we've learned about the house of Zadok is that their goal was to be that connection where there was this free flow of information, of this connection with the heavenly tabernacle and with that which was on earth. So think about this free flow. How do you keep that free flow of the heavenly realm, the heavenly tabernacle with the earthly tabernacle? How do you keep it? Is that there can't be anything that defiles. So their goal, if you go and you look at the community rules in the Qumran communities, it's like, that seems really strict. Well, why would it be really strict? From our Western point of view, it's like, there's no way I could live in that type of place, right? I mean, it's like, that's just so much under the law. But what were they guarding? Isn't this kind of what we're talking about here? There's an issue of what is being guarded, that which is being
Holy.
protected.
Yeah.
This holy flow of communication and fellowship with the Most High, with the heavenly realms, with the earthly realms. They understood this whole connection of that there's this realm, and Paul talks about it as, don't you know that you might be entertaining angels unaware?
That's good.
Well, how in the world would that which is this coming from the very throne room of Yah to earth even come near to a people that's unholy? Because what was the design, what was the plan? I mean, think about this.
That's why I said.
Zechariah, John the Baptist, John the Immerser's father, was serving in the temple. It was his time to serve in the temple. And in that experience, there was an encounter with the angel Gabriel. And Gabriel says, you're going to name your son John. Wait a minute, John's not part of the family name.
We got mad at him.
But he named him John. He says, no, and in order, as a sign, you're not going to be able to speak. But what put him into that position that Gabriel felt comfortable enough to have this connection?
Sometimes knowledge can be puffed up.
Other than Zechariah had this, his relationship with the Father was so pure and so innocent that he was able to receive an angel of the Most High from the throne room of Yah. Think about from the very tabernacle of heaven has come down and spoke to him face to face.
But didn't he argue about the name and stuff?
Well, that's not so much the point. It's like, well, it doesn't make sense to me. But, okay, the sign is true. I can't talk. I'll name him John.
Yes, but
Right?
why did the Lord do that to him? So you gotta ask yourself that. Why did he cut off his voice?
Because he argued.
That was the
Yes,
message.
that's what I was saying a minute ago.
First, that was the message.
Yes.
2, it was to be a sign to everybody outside.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And 3, John, Yochanan, that name ties John to the house of Zadok. If he kept it in the family name, it could be lost and separated from the house of Zadok. But John would become the rightful high priest, that voice crying out from the wilderness, or as the Dead Sea Scrolls brings out, that he would be the teacher of righteousness.
Prophetic.
Right? He would be the one that would be set up to meet Yeshua at the Jordan River in order for Yeshua to be immersed. He would fit those qualifications. And therefore, he also carried the name that connected it to the house of Zadok. And so it's so important that, therefore, think about Zechariah then. He is not involved in these things. There's this purity that's protected, this lineage, that even allows this communication from heaven. However, Yah sends it. Now, think about this. In the house of Zadok, the priestly community that was in exile, out in the desert communities, they did not believe that the canon was ever closed.
Oh, when you finish that, I gotta answer your question.
Okay, so what do I mean by the canon never closed? Because we have our 66 books in our Bible, and we say, there's no new revelation, it's stuck right here, these are the parameters that we have. Well, that's not the tradition of this priestly lineage. They continue to believe, just like the books of Zechariah and Malachi and Zephaniah were continually added as words of Yahweh for mankind, that those words were still flowing and
They believe
being,
Yahweh is still speaking.
and still speaking to people today.
Because he is
And
the same yesterday, today, and forever.
it's
so he's
it's
still in.
only those who took over out of the lineage of the Maccabees and the Hasmonean kingdom, by which the Pharisees come out of, who said, no, the canon's closed. And that God's not speaking anymore. In fact, the voice, instead of being the voice of Yah, we only maybe hear a little inkling of a sound, which would be the bat kol. The bat kol is what they call it, the bat kol, which is the voice of the daughter. And in other words, it's just a soft voice that we can't say with definity that this is God speaking. And so we get traditions even among Christians that say, well, the scriptures are closed, there's no more gifts of the Holy Spirit, there's no prophetic voice today. It's the same spirit.
But wouldn't that make it mean that God changes? If those people that believe those things, yeah, the gifts are over, he's not speaking anymore, then that means he has changed from what he once was. And
He
that's
doesn't
not true.
change,
Connie wants to know, how does John, quote unquote John, the name John, connect to the house of Zadok and et cetera?
That's a really good question. I came across it this week, and you know what? I'm going to study that out more.
I mean, physically, we know that John, I mean, he was physically in the line of the priesthood, but for the name specifically, we could do some research on that, but Yah gives names. I'll be specific. In our family alone, the firstborn male in the Craig family generally has been a named John, and he's a preacher. And I did that through studying the lineage in John's family. And therefore, you have John Craig and Jonathan Craig and John Craig. But there's a reason behind it, but Yah specifically named them. So,
I would also like to say that it's very interesting that at the time of the Maccabees, who was the first installment of the priest of the Maccabees? Was his name Jonathan? I think it was. I think that was the first priest of the Maccabees, of the usurped priesthood. So it's almost like it's like, let's go back, let's reestablish who the correct John is.
So
The priest.
typically, a name will have a meaning.
Yes.
Okay, so what does the name John or Jonathan mean?
is it a light of God?
I think it means God's gift.
And that's probably the reason behind it.
Yeah, the gift of Yah. Yeah, I think that's correct. Someone
I
could do a
always
name
get
search on
confused
it.
'cause our son has 3 first names, Jonathan, Michael, Craig, so he always gives me he's God, the guy's gives me a light of God with us, so.
But that may very well answer the question as far as why he had to name his son that.
Yeah,
The gift of restoration, the gift of preparing the way for the Messiah.
yeah. Very important. It also establishes, get this, because didn't Yeshua say that if you'll have it, John came in the spirit of Elijah, in the spirit
Yes.
of Eliyahu, correct? So, think about this. So he is the voice crying out in the wilderness. He's the one that is saying, here comes the Messiah. Well, we're waiting for the Messiah to return. Are we not living in the days of Elijah still? We're living in the days of
Yes,
Eliyahu.
Yes.
So because the voice is still crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way of Yahweh. That's what this whole idea of the encampment is about, is how do you prepare the way? Well, we've got to get rid of anything that's a distraction, anything that's spiritually and physically and spiritually a blockage to Yah's complete fiber optic system.
Exactly.
That's a purified system, that has that complete instantaneous communication that we're connected to. And if that becomes so strong, anything that becomes a hindrance to that now puts that person into physical danger. So I think that's also really a key thing. The Midbar, Numbers 5:3 says, you shall put out both male and female. You shall put them outside the camp, but that they may not defile their camps in the midst of which I dwell. So, let's put it in another perspective. You realize this is day 49 of the counting of the Omer? So tomorrow is the 50th day.
Which, by the way,
Which is? the Feast of Pentecost.
I was just gonna say, we're
Shavuot.
meeting, what, at 10 here?
Yeah, we'll meet here at 10.
Yeah. Or a short service.
So it'll be a celebration.
Worship.
And so it's no coincidence, therefore, that this Torah cycle actually comes at the time of Shavuot. Isn't that interesting? I mean, the very fact that tomorrow, and this
Happy
Torah
day.
portion is very important. And it's in this Torah portion that we focus, so we've talked about this issue, these issues of defilement, the law of jealousy, and the suspected adulteress, and how they're connected to Shavuot.
Not like the scripture, don't covet.
So, because now it's the Shavuot connection. What was that a picture of? What happened on the day at the mountain? They prepared themselves for 3 days. They dressed in white. They were not to come together with their spouses. They were to prepare themselves because Yah would come down on the mountain, which is said, this is the wedding day. This is the wedding day. No defilement, discharge, or touching of the dead. Everybody is going to come together. This is going to be a wonderful time. And
Yes.
you think about this connection here. No defilement. Because why? Yah is coming down on the mountain. The voice of Yah is about to speak.
Can you imagine?
Second chapter of Acts, the voice of Yah spoke to all of Israel through the people. Because all of the people that had gathered for Shavuot heard the message in their own language.
And it's gonna happen.
But the
again.
gift, the gift is in the hearing.
Mhm.
The gift is in the hearing.
Okay, but think about that. Again, this is that connection between heaven and earth. Are we not supposed to be able to hear and to say?
Yeah,
We hear and we say. We say what we hear. And if we're adding to or taking away from it, then we're bringing defilement into the camp. Because that which Yah has spoken is now corrupted. And now we've got this mixture that is being spilled out. And how many times does mixture lead people astray?
we're supposed to be a conduit, C-O-N-D, how do you spell that, U-I-T, of Him, okay? That's righteousness, that's fulfillment, that's everything. He's coming back for 'em.
Yeah. And, just to address there, yes, we're talking about John the Immerser, John the Baptist, and not King Saul's son, Jonathan. Which is connected, therefore, to the tribe of Levi, and then more specifically to the lineage that comes from Aaron.
And which son of Aaron?
Eleazar,
Eleazar.
the son of
Into
Aaron, which goes down to
Phinehas.
Phinehas, which then ultimately leads to Zadok, who, the Ithamas, what was his name?
I don't know what.
The other son, Ithamar, whose lineage was cut off at the time of David because he joined himself to the wrong
And
king.
the reason John was raised in the Qumran was because he was, first off, remember that community was known for taking in orphans and things like that, but also because that's where the true priesthood was living at the time, although different communities, the Nazarites had spread out throughout, but that's where the priesthood was, so, because they had been kicked out of Jerusalem, so.
So then when we start to tie these things together, it's like, well, it seems like, man, there sure seems to be a lot of rules in order to keep the camp clean. Or should we look at it as this way, is that it's really telling us about what freedom really is? Where the Spirit of Yahweh is, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, there is freedom. And so this whole journey, now they've gone a little over a
There's
year,
life in it.
a little over a year since they left Egypt. They've built the tabernacle. they've gone through the counting of the Omer. They're already up to Shavuot, and of course we're past that by at this point in time. But it is to chronicleize the journey of leaving slavery and entering into freedom. And entering into freedom is not what the world gives us.
No.
The world
Absolutely.
wants to say that freedom is when we get to do as we please. And what real freedom is when we're able to do what Yah pleases,
Amen.
or pleases Yah.
You
You know?
have to have boundary stones. And people try to move those boundary stones, and that's when you don't have freedom, you become a prisoner.
Yeah, and it's so easy, and how quickly and over time, takes place. And then those moved boundary stones are supposed to represent what's supposed to be truth. And in reality, it's taken us off track.
Run those boundary stones, whether you add them or take them out or whatever, become witnesses for or against you.
Yeah. So, which reminds me, since we're kind of talking about bringing these things together, there is a playlist over at the Life of Worship Ministries YouTube channel,
There's lots of playlists.
and this is on the priesthood and the Dead Sea Scrolls, the priesthood, and the calendar. It's that whole series there, and it really gives a lot of understanding of what the first century believers believed and what they did and what practices they had, and what type of culture that they were actually battling, and how they were having to work through that. And so if you haven't heard that series, we recommend that you go and take a look at that, and just take the time to go through it. And because it's very, very revealing, and Pastor Sandi did an excellent job in researching that. It took her hours and hours and hours of putting together the information and then being able to summarize it and make it digestible to hear. So I do recommend, if you haven't gone through that, I think it's 10 sessions in there.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And
So I do highly recommend it.
The one gives the, kind of like a quick foundation of what she expanded on.
Yeah, I have
Yes.
Eddie's, so when you add Eddie's into it, it's more than that.
Yeah, so it's like 13 or so. No, it's
Well,
maybe
no,
14.
because I have also when Eddie was on walking.
15.
And so it's more like 15.
Yeah, 15 messages. All right. John 8:32 says, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free."
Amen.
So it also makes me think then, if this is, because now this is so close, I mean, Aaron's still the high priest, and we have all these things established, and they're living it out now in the wilderness, then if these things get changed over time, then now we become subject to a doctrine of man by which there is no freedom. All of a sudden we find these fences, and we find these rules, we find these boundaries that are not Yah's boundaries, but they're man's boundaries. And when we have those boundaries going on, then where does it take us for today, for how we live today? And if Yah is still working within his own kingdom and his own protocols, and there's a system over here that are not in line with his, then how can this system over here actually function to prepare the people for his return? A counterfeit system will only give you a counterfeit. It's going to look a lot like it, but it's never prepared to have that direct interaction with the Most High. It does not break. If you have a counterfeit bill, it might make it through the register a couple different times, but it's going to be found out. Those bank machines will pull it out. It won't get very far, right? And so I'm going to say, is that not the same way with us? If we're living in a counterfeit system, how quickly will Yah's system spit us out? So we have to recognize that what is being restored is Yah's desire to set us free and to bring us over here to this area of freedom. this place of life that he wants us to live in, because we're going to step into truth. The more truth is revealed, the more free we get. Would you not agree that when we stepped into and I say the Hebraic foundations of our faith, that we felt freedom, but it was just a level of freedom. How much more is that as we begin to live it out and we find out, oh, I didn't know about that. I've been living this way, and now I'm discovering a better way. There's always like, oh, I'm aligning myself more and more to the Scripture. I'm aligning myself more and more to the truth. And the more we align ourselves to the truth, how much more freedom do we walk into? So if we're actually recognizing, and I hate to bring up this whole idea of this calendar system, but I think it's really a huge reset, because when the times and the seasons were changed, and it's led people down a wrong path in a counterfeit system, if we shift ourselves over to what was being followed by Aaron and by Eleazar and all the way down to Pincus and Moses was in on it, and then the house of Zadok, and it brings us to the time of Yeshua. Yeshua fell into that, and then things got changed again, or it was competing systems. We know it's competing systems because Yeshua is always up against the Pharisees, the leaven of the Pharisees, and I think Christians have been very good at identifying, well, that was dead works. It sure was, because the Pharisees had left the truth of the Scripture. But in the restoration of this whole process since around 2009, 2010, and as the revelation of our Hebraic roots has been opened up to us, and then there's still been progress.
And it
This
makes more
alignment,
sense. It makes more sense.
It does, and this
Right.
alignment, therefore, sets us up to the reality of, boy, I didn't realize that I was still walking in that defilement, or I was still connected with this harlot called Babylon.
Mhm.
And all of those marionette strings was still connecting me and controlling me, and I had this semblance of freedom, but in reality I was still bound up.
Well, and the calendar thing also explains why Yeshua and his disciples had the Passover meal basically 2 days before everybody else.
All of it does, but it's just as you said though, when we're walking, even though there's continued revelation, I guarantee there's gonna be new things
Yes.
that we're gonna be like, oh, well, maybe we need to change, we're gonna be constantly learning, but we need to be willing to change. And when we find truth and recognize that too, we need to be able to recognize that truth. But you're really, when you're not walking in truth, you don't think, as you said, you think you're free, but you are still bound to be. I think of so much of our community that's bound up in modern day Phariseeism, as Eddie would put it, Eddie Chumney, that's bound up in traditions of man. You leave Christmas and Easter and all those things behind, and then you walk right into another form of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just sad, because that's not freedom. It's another garment. You're wearing another garment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And since we're talking about we are kings and priests, how we act and what we do, it does matter, because that the priesthood, we as a people, Israel has certain specific duties, and even so, the priesthood, we have certain things that are required of us, and we've got to heed and pay attention to those things. And if that means saying something over and over, sometimes it takes that much to get it through our thick head. Or maybe that's just me, I don't know.
Well,
But in
we-
general, I found that it's pretty much all of us.
Well, I think about this. How many times when you hear an advertisement, how many times do you hear it before it actually hits you and said, wait a minute, I've been looking for a source, and I've been listening to the same commercial, never thought I needed it, and all of a sudden now I need it. I remember that commercial. It was telling me about this product that now I know where to go to get it. I mean, how many times do we need it repeated? And each time we hear it, it takes hold that much more.
Things, yeah.
I mean, how many times, growing up, I asked my mom, why did we not keep the Sabbath according to the scripture and we did it on Sunday? Well, I got the typical response.
Because we serve a resurrected Lord.
Yeah, and it never set right. It just never set right. It's like, it still doesn't fit right, and it doesn't fit, just until I kept hearing it and hearing it and hearing it, and the tradition got broke out of me, and then I found some other people in agreement that said, well, that makes sense. We need to make a shift and make that change. So the leaven of the Pharisees is not any different than that. But isn't it interesting that at Shavuot, what is part of the ceremony of Shavuot? Take the 2 loaves of bread, and they wave it along with the lamb without blemish as a burnt offering, and the sheaves are waved.
The loaves are waved.
The loaves are waved, and it should give us that whole idea. Oh, think about now at Passover it was unleavened. This time it's leavened, and now we have this picture that's going on, and Yeshua is talking about beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. He's never talking about. He's not talking about an unleavened bread. He's talking about a leaven. So in other words, is there leaven that's good? We always look in the context of leaven being bad, because leaven will, use the term, infect the entire loaf, right? It expands and it goes to all of that bread. But, so, there's good leaven. And what leaven is that? The leaven that starts out as that small little portion that does expand into all of the loaf, all of that whole batch of dough. And that's the leaven that is acceptable before the Most High, that is to be waved. So this whole free flow that we want is just to make sure we have to continually be saying, all right, Father, I'm a big old blob of dough, and I keep getting bad leaven in me. So start over. Because I want the whole pure leaven in me. So we've got to get rid of touching the dead. Touching the dead. What are some things that we do that's literally, it's like touching the dead, touching the dead body, and we got to go outside the camp?
Well,
Do we
somebody
keep
dies,
do we
it's
keep
just-
going back and saying, oh y'all, please just remember that I'm really a good person. Do you know how many people that are in prison that are murderers, and they are drug dealers, and they are violent and rapists and all that sort of stuff? And they say, well, compared to other people, I'm a good person. Well, that's touching the dead. I mean, they're just like, I can still do what I want, and I'm really not that bad of a person. Well, what about this whole idea of a discharge? We got to get rid of those discharges. Do you ever think about this? Let's look at it in a metaphorical side of it. What type of discharge does everybody hear or see in people? Like what comes out of our mouth? So if we have an adulterous heart, isn't out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks?
Yes.
So what type of discharge is being released from us? Are we really having that which is connected to the kingdom protocol? Do we have language that welcomes the heavenly hosts, where they feel, wouldn't you think it'd be cool to have an encounter with the angel Gabriel?
That'd be scary, but it would be awesome too.
It would be totally awesome, and you think, well, maybe it's not this world that I'm living in. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the one that's preventing I'm not talking about the worship of angels. I'm just talking about they are messengers, and they are messengers from the Most High. That's what Hebrews 1:7 tells us about. Are they not these messengers?
And we're spiritual first, okay?
So maybe we think, well, maybe I'm not hearing getting these supernatural messages from Yah because of the discharge of my own life. The words are filling the air. I don't know, it's worth thinking about. The words are filling the air, and it's providing this, it's creating walls and barriers by which the angels of the Most High are saying, I'm not coming in to give you that message until the air's cleared. Right? Sound goes forever. Every word that we've ever said is being recorded. That metal pole right there is recording every word that's ever been spoken in this room.
Every frequency.
And there was a guy that was talking. He was a scientist, tech guy, and he brought an instrument. He brought a piece of metal, and he put it out there on the podium when he was talking, and he said, "I'm recording everything on this piece of metal, and when I leave here today, I'm going to go back to my home, to my shop, and I'm going to download everything that's in this piece of metal." Because the metal recorded every single bit of it. It's like, that's physics? That's just plain physics? Right, William? It's just plain physics. It's just absorbing the sound waves, and then he had the way to retrieve it from a piece of metal. But that doesn't make it any different than remember the cassette tape?
That was like a metal
Cassette and
oxide.
8-tracks.
It's a metal oxide that was on that plastic, right? 8 tracks. Yeah.
And then your vinyl records.
They have the ability to record sound, so why would not that metal pole be able to record everything that we say? But yet, leprosy.
That's why rocks become witnesses, because the rocks cry out, because they recorded everything.
Yes.
Exactly.
And they're proving stuff like that today.
And leprosy specifically also connects the tongue and the evil speaking. And it's just like, well.
That's why after the download on the boundary stuff that I'm still trying to organize, he's been downloading stuff about frequencies.
Yeah.
And now I'm rabbit trailing frequencies.
Yeah.
As well as the boundary stones.
It's like, Irma, I just am really concerned. I'm really concerned about Sister
Poor
Jackie.
Irma.
I'm so concerned about Sister Jackie, and I don't know what to do about it. But did you hear what she did and what's going on with her?
Shame,
We need to
shame.
pray. We need to pray for Jackie. I mean, think about that. I'm telling you, is that maybe way Miriam was talking? I'm just so concerned about Moses. I mean, after all, he's just carrying so much on his shoulders right now.
And don't tell anybody,
And,
okay? That I've
and
told you.
I think we need to pray about this and maybe lighten some of that load.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Wrong.
So I think, would you not say that the angels who are constantly in the presence of the Most Holy and the Most High then are so familiar with being set apart and that level of holiness that sometimes they're like, I don't want to go into the stench of the
And
world.
I haven't got time for your stench either, okay?
And so
Wake up.
it's very sobering to me to think, man, am I carrying the stench of the dead?
Gotta check us.
And
check ourselves.
is the air around me filled with the sounds of those things that would just bring a repulsion of the angelic?
Mhm.
So,
None of us are perfect, but you gotta go for the mark.
think about this. Did you ever think about how Jerusalem was selected for the place of, and the location in Jerusalem for the temple? Where was it located? 1 Chronicles 21:18 says, "Therefore the angel of Yahweh commanded God to say to David, that David should go and erect an altar to Yahweh on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. The threshing. Well, what is a threshing floor?
That's where you
Separate.
separate the chaff from the barley or the wheat. from the
So,
grains.
so it's a threshing floor for grain, right? Specifically wheat, and the altar was a place of judgment or reward. A threshing floor is where the wheat is separated from the chaff, just like you said, Tammy. Chaff is the useless part of the plant, which is blown away or consumed by fire, which is judgment. The tares have already been separated from the wheat before it's brought into the temple. So for now, keep in the back of your mind, wheat is symbolic of people, and also that the adulterous woman will be judged near the altar. So that's the other part of chapter 5 in Numbers, is the woman caught with adultery. So what is it about? The threshing floor has to do with the wheat. What's waved before Yahweh on Shavuot? It's the loaves of wheat bread. And it's the place by which, when we come before Yah, everything. How does Paul say it? Let's go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 3.
My mom and I passed a wheat field, and they've already harvested the wheat for the spring.
Yeah, it's wheat harvest time, isn't it? Yeah, sure is. Sadly, they don't let that grain dry up naturally. They got to spray it with all those disinfectants, or not just for those
That's why we have our.
desiccates, all
things
those
we have today,
desiccates.
yes. That could be another reason for a skin
Oh, yeah, I have
irritation.
wheat growing in my front yard again this year.
You have
Wheat growing in my front yard again this year.
Really?
Yep. I still waiting on it.
So let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Verse 12, now if any man builds upon the foundation with gold, silver, and precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each man's work will become evident, for the day will show it, because it is to be revealed with fire. And the fire itself will test the quality of each man's work. If man's work which he has built upon it remains, he shall receive a reward. If any man's work is burned up, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so through fire. What's fire? Judgment, right? So what is not saved? So wood, hay, and straw. You could probably put in that category chaff, that which is not going to be made into that loaf of bread that we're talking about with the pure leaven in it. Do you not know that you are a temple of Yah, and that the Spirit of Yah dwells in you? If any man destroys the temple of Yah, Yah will destroy him, for the temple of Yah is holy, and that is what you are. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you thinks that he is wise in this age, let him become foolish, that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness before Yah, for it is written, He is the one who catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, Yahweh knows the reasonings of the wise, that they are useless. So then, let no one boast in men, for all things belong to you, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or the things present or the things to come, all things belong to you. And you belong to Messiah, and Messiah belongs to Yah. So, isn't it interesting that the placement of the temple in Jerusalem was a threshing floor? And at the threshing floor was the altar. And at the altar
sense.
is where the fire is. And that's the place of the judgment. Now, judgment is good. It's also bad, depending on what side of the altar you're on, right? So
Be painful.
you can be the one that's bringing the offerings to the altar, or you can be the one that's being put on the altar. So one way or another, think about the 200 watchers over in the book of Enoch. Just thinking about one of the things that we were Okay, just in summary, if you go back to this last week's Walking in Spirit and Truth, talking about the realm of the undead, is what I entitled it. The Watchers were imprisoned in this one place within the earth, and there's a description of where they are. It's like this mountain of fire. They are literally, they are imprisoned in Hades or hell or Sheol or whatever, where it is a place of great torment until the judgment. And then at the time of the judgment, they're cast into the lake of fire.
So they can't win.
So there is, and why?
Right.
They will be eternally burning, because according to Enoch and what he says, and I have no reason to dispute it, is that they are eternal beings because they are from heaven, and they left that abode, and because they sinned against Yah, they sinned against the Torah, the instructions of Yah, they were given an assignment to watch over men, not to corrupt men.
Yes.
And they departed from it. And because of that, they are in eternal judgment. And in that judgment is, right now they're in fire until the time of judgment. And then at the time of judgment, they will be cast into the lake of fire for eternal judgment. That from that time, when they're bound up through eternity, forever,
That's a long time.
forever, because they're eternal beings. And so, it really is pretty sobering, because Paul says, don't you know that even you will judge angels? Did that ever bother you?
Nope. Oh, no.
It did me. I'll be honest with you. I said, that doesn't fit my theology. I don't understand why I would be put in a place of judging angels. I don't get
Well, it's kind of
that.
like judgments of the court, in the heavenly court. If there's a heavenly court, there's judgments. So, we are to judge the angels, it says that, so.
But why isn't that not Yeshua's responsibility? Because he's both judge and lawgiver.
Yes, but he said it.
And yet, here
Well,
we,
maybe because we may not be actual judges, but we're gonna be witnesses, because
Something, yeah.
our lives will be a testimony to any influence that they had on us.
then Paul should never have said it. But Paul said it.
But our witness leads to the final judgment.
I think we're
So-
gonna judge them.
I think we're participants.
Well,
in
So-
the
it may
judgment.
very well be because of their transgression is why they get
Yes.
judged.
Yeah.
There's a
Because
price.
they set us up to fail.
So
That's a process. Yes.
wouldn't kind of think about of our American so-called justice system, but our justice system where you have a judge and you have a jury,
It's a joke.
right?
The one that just recently
Sorry.
Okay?
came out.
And,
Most of it
and
isn't
what
so
is,
good in
what
it.
did the jury show us how not to be a jury this last week?
They
They allow political influence to affect their decision. But in reality, what does a jury do? A jury has to know the protocols of the kingdom so well, when they recognize a violation of that, then they can say, okay, the judge is presiding, the jury will pronounce the judgment. Did you ever think about that?
Yeah, we could be a jury.
And so I think what is this great cloud of witnesses that are up there? There was a book by John Bevere, and I don't remember the name of it. Sandy would probably remember the name of it. And it's talking about this heavenly realm, and how some would be selected from earth and then brought into this heavenly realm, and they would see this great hall of witnesses. And I think about these grandstands of people that then this person would walk down in front of to meet Yeshua, and on the front of this big screen there would be their life, and the good, the bad, the ugly, and then Yeshua would open up his arms and welcome them in. And along the way into this place where all this was taking place, they came across several different types of people. Some had brooms out and they were just sweeping the street, and they said, I'm just so grateful, I'm so happy. You're thinking, oh, a street sweeper, oh my goodness, I'm such a low position. I'm so grateful that I've been given this wonderful position within the kingdom of Yah. You know,
glad you made
this is
it
so
in.
good. And you'd see all these different people, and they all had the same humble attitude. Didn't matter what type of job they were been
Yes.
given. But some, but you think about the ones that are in the great hall were the closest to the throne. and those had endured much more and had lived that righteous life. So some would, well, everything got burned up, but yet they were saved, and yet others were full of the gold, silver, and precious stones.
The martyrs.
And everything that they had worked for in life had been preserved and you could see the richness of their life as it. And so I think about this, and to be in that position says, don't you know that you will judge angels? I think there's that connection.
That tells you our authority right
So,
there.
I think it's a humble position, but it's the idea of understanding the ways and the protocols of
Yes,
Yah so
yes,
closely that Yah brings us in to His decision making. And that's huge, and I think that the very fact that Yah would even want to speak to us now, and speak to us, and literally an open canon that He's still speaking. That to hear that voice. I mean, have you ever heard Yah speak? I'm not talking about necessarily an audible voice, but that word of the Lord was so strong. You just were so humble, it broke you down into tears because it was so full of love and so yet so powerful and so life changing. So
Alive. His word is alive, and it changes your life.
I think that whole idea, I don't know we need to wrap it up here, but that whole idea, chapter 6 talks about the law of the Nazarites and is about someone saying, look, I want to remove all of the haze, all of the fuzziness, all of the layers, all of anything that's been blocking me from hearing the voice of Yah. And they shave their heads, and they don't let wine touch or anything from the vine touch their lips, and they purify themselves, and they go through this process. Why? So they can hear Yah.
And because they love Yah.
Yeah. I mean, well, I say they let their hair grow long. They don't let a razor come to it, and then at the end of that, they cut it all off. But you think about that. Think about how that is this whole idea of, I don't want any barriers. I don't want anything else left between me and the voice of Yah. I don't want to have any barriers between that which is coming from the sound of heaven reaching me. I need to make sure I'm open. My heart is in its place. That it's not covered. It's not. That it's not. That it's not been penetrated by the harlots of Midian coming in and breaching the perimeter and coming through the camp all the way to the Holy of Holies. We don't want it. What is it? Because if my heart is the Holy of Holies, has it been preserved and reserved only for the Most High?
Are you married to him or not?
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that is going to bring us to a close. Thank you, everyone that's been joining us. By the way, stick with us. In an hour, we'll be back with the encounter service, so we'd love for everybody to join us again on the Life of Worship Ministries channel as well. And let's close in prayer. Father, we just bless you and we thank you. And I just think about all of these different elements of how you set up the camp, the protective barriers, to keep the defilement out of the camp.
Yes.
And our responsibilities even now, here living in the wilderness, and where that puts us. So Father, just let your word settle within us as we gather, and we even enter in to the completion of the Omer and the Shavuot and all of those things, that we might hear and see you like we never have before.
Yes,
we just
Yah.
want to bless you and honor you in the name of Yeshua. Amen. Anybody wants to join us, we'll put it online at 10 Central tomorrow for Shavuot, for a gathering. And we'll see you then. And Shabbat Shalom.